essential to know about before you begin your fitness journey or any journey in your life. And it wasn't until recently that I realized how important understanding the 5 phases of change are. The 5 stages of change are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. Those 5 phases are the sequence, if you will, to any big change that you go through in your life. It doesn't even have to be big, small, any change. It's the phases of change.
Before we even talk about exercise, it's important to understand where you already are, both physically and mentally. And if you aren't ready to change, then you aren't ready. But I'm going to be optimistic and say you are in preparation. And if you want to get to action and maintenance, this video will get you there.
First of all, if you're in pre-contemplation, that's before you even think about making a change. So you need to be at least past that, and you got to be in a point where you're ready to make the change, or at least you think you're ready to make the change and you want to make the change. So if you're not there yet, then maybe you're not ready to watch this video. If you're there, then that's who I want to talk to right now, because that's half the battle, is being there mentally and being there just emotionally and just being there mentally. It's mostly mental. I know it's cliche, guys. People say that all the time, but it is very, very true. You need to be there. You need to believe it for yourself in order for it to be true. You need to want it yourself. Before that happens, it's not going to happen. If you believe that nothing will happen, if you believe that there's nothing for you, that you can't do it, that you're not good enough, then you aren't good enough. Until you believe you are good enough and you can do it, that's when the change will happen. I want to prove that anybody could exercise. And I don't want it to be something that people fear. I want it to be something that people look forward to and incorporate into their lives for better health, better standard of living, better fulfillment, better relationships. I could go on and on the benefits of working out and exercise has had on my personal life. My goal is to motivate, encourage, and believe in you when it feels like no one else does. There's so many different ways people avoid working out. The ones that come to mind are not knowing what to do, not knowing where to start, not knowing if they could handle it. But I'm going to try to clear all those barriers right now, because I believe exercise needs to be accessible to anybody, anywhere, at any time. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. Remember those 5. You want to have SMART goals to be able to realistically and attainably meet them. SMART goals are essential to have, especially if you're new to exercise, if you've never done it before. So just take it in steps. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be intimidating. All right. I want to prove that anybody could do work. Anybody could exercise. You got to walk before you run. Everybody's got to start somewhere, and that's okay.
The most important part of any new exercise routine is injury prevention, particularly for a calisthenic workout routine where injury is far less likely to happen due to no load. Therefore, calisthenics are overall much safer than other forms of resistance training than, say, weights, especially for the beginner. I'm going to primarily focus only on calisthenic movement, which is basically just body weight. I'm not going to associate any additional weight, not going to add stress to the joints that isn't needed for this. So if you were like me and say living a really busy lifestyle with a family, such as myself, calisthenics remains the best for affordability, accessibility, sustainability, and safety. With all of this in mind, I couldn't think of a better exercise to start with and show everybody how to do properly and find their own variation of than the push-up. If you're looking to do push-ups but you've never been able to, you haven't probably started from scratch before. This means that as a prerequisite, it's important to identify the area you want to work, hence the muscle or the muscle group. It's also really important to be familiar with your own physical capabilities as well. This means pay close attention to your own body and your own anatomy, and pay attention to what particular specific movements you struggle with, and that's how you're going to avoid injury and get better and get stronger. One of the biggest benefits to exercising is to find that relief from that discomfort, not to feel trapped in your own body. Get an association with where you want to feel
the movement. Basically, any pushing movement is associated with your chest and shoulders. Focus first on your posture. Even if you're seated or standing, notice my back. Okay. My shoulder blades are back. I'm not hunched forward. Nice and tall. If you're going to learn how to do push-ups properly, master these first. Keep your elbows in a natural position. Try not to flare them or keep them super tight. Keep them neutral. You want to not force this. It should be natural. The same way you naturally push seated or standing is the same way you're going to naturally push on the ground when you're doing a push-up. This method of prerequisite training that I use actually applies to any muscle group in the entire body. Just find out where you want to work and then focus on the appropriate anatomical movement or isometric hold, and you'll get where you want to be. Being aware of your certain conditions is essential because it's going to ensure your safety. So if you had bad knees, for example, maybe a kneeling push-up isn't best for you. Instead, try a medicine ball squeeze if you need to make it out of reps that way. You could also do an isometric hold, which is just a hold of that muscle contraction, so you keep squeezing the ball continuously. You could do it bent arm, straight arm, whatever works for you. You could also do another option, which is grab a pillow or something smaller ball, smaller object around the house, such as this pillow. Double it up if you need to. You could also use that as it has more squeezing area, so you're not confined to any equipment whatsoever. You could use whatever you got in the house. It doesn't have to be pillows. It was just easiest to show that particular example. It's like I said, guys, no equipment is required to do any workout. I'm going to stand by that for this entire channel. So you could do it against the wall. You could, if you can do a kneeling push-up, like I said before, just make sure your knees are good and your wrists as well. A lot of people overlook the wrists too. But if you can, don't be too concerned about having the abs tight. I know that's quote-unquote proper form, but if you're just a beginner, it's perfectly fine to do a little arch in your back as you come up, kind of like a yoga move. They call those cobra push-ups. Just as long as you're cleared to work out by your doctor and you could perform a prone position safely. Just to get the feel of how a push-up should feel, you could try a negative, which is the release phase. There's the loading phase and there's the extension phase. In this case, our chest is extending on the unload or the lowering phase, which is eccentric or negative. So it's just the negative motion, the eccentric motion to the push-up. The important part with any exercise, not even just a push-up, is feeling confident doing it. So you got to find a variation that you're comfortable doing. Whatever variation works best for you, practice over and over again, and I promise you it will get easier and you will get stronger and you will see results. It's all about trial and error. So to recap, if you have minimal to no issues with your wrists, shoulders, lower back, knees, or toes, any of these options are safe to do. So starting on the top left with the prerequisite movements, right? Especially if you are a total beginner, you've never done this before, get a feel of how the muscle feels, and then move down to the floor variants. You could also try it on the wall. You got the arrows signifying going in or out to add resistance or take it away. You could also try a ball squeeze if you do have those issues. Let's talk about acronyms for a minute. There's so many acronyms involved in the exercise world, so many more than I even expected, and I've been in this industry for about 10 years. With all this said, it's easy to see how this could be overwhelming to many people, but don't worry, just keep it simple, follow the basics, you'll be just fine. R-R-O-M-M. Just remember this acronym. Remember BROM. Breathing, resistance, range of motion, and what part of your body is moving and what part of your body is not. My breathing, normally you inhale as you load up, exhale on the unload. Actually, since this video is for specifically beginners, it would make more sense to go over the last one first. Focus on what is moving and what is not. Just what is moving during an exercise is equally, if not more important than what isn't moving. All right, so this could also be called fixed points and mobile points. So you got to focus on something that is fixed and something that is moving. So that all goes back to knowing what the insertions and origins of each muscle group are, but that's more of a scientific and more in-depth video. So that goes beyond the scope of this video. So that's for another day. The goal is to keep it simple in this one.
Before I continue here, it's essential to understand the different types of muscle contractions. So let's begin by going over the 3 different types of muscle contraction. Concentric is the shortening phase of the movement, where you guessed it, the muscle shortens, also known as the positive contraction. Isometric is the non-movement phase, otherwise known as the stationary contractor. And as we went over before, eccentric is known as the lengthening phase or negative part of the movement.
If it's an isometric exercise, obviously nothing is moving. So you got, oftentimes you'll see people in the gym or people who are big fitness guys or gals in the gym, and they'll focus on, you know, oh, I can move this much weight, or I could do this movement with this weight, but they don't think about the sloppy form and like the kipping if it's like a pull-up or, you know, stuff like that. So if you think about it, like, okay, I'll go off the pull-up example, right? If you're doing a pull-up and you end up swinging or swaying, there's a lot more to a pull-up than just working your back, okay? You want to keep everything still, so it works the abs, it works the glutes, everything works together. The contraction of the other muscle groups works in unison with the muscle that's moving. All right, same with a push-up. See, I'll do a makeshift push-up on these rocks here. Let me get this bag off here. So like, if I'm doing a push-up, right? And I'm all like floppy here. Obviously I showed it in this video, but that was just to kind of get the movement down. All right, it's not just my arms. It's my abs, it's my legs, it's my hips. Everything is working at once. So I want to make sure my whole body is as solid as a rock, except for the bend of my elbow. Okay? Your whole body works together as one. Just remember, one of my old coworkers told me something that resonated with me. Your body is all intertwined. Every muscle is intertwined. It's like a net, not a puzzle. Okay? So it's all a big network that works together. So you can't have one muscle group working and not have it be affected somewhere else in your body. There's also other important things to take into account when it comes to exercise overall. It wouldn't be an overall exercise introduction beginner video without mentioning static and dynamic exercises. A static exercise would be like an isometric, such as a plank or a wall sit. A dynamic exercise would be something like a burpee or a push-up, something with an eccentric and concentric phase. All right, something that's movement based. Just these are just basic terms that you should be familiar with. It's also important to mention levers. All right, so give you an example. If I were to do a push-up, right, I'll use as basic as an example as possible. The reason why the regressed version of a push-up is on your knees is because it's a smaller lever. Once you go on your toes, that makes the lever longer. The longer the lever, the more challenging the exercise is, because the more resistance it puts on that muscle group. So I could go more in depth on this, but I'll just keep it simple for the purpose of this video. Inhale, eccentric. Exhale, concentric. Okay, that's not always the rule of thumb. Just don't be overly concerned with the breathing. Just let it be natural. Okay, it's not really until you get into the really challenging exercises for yourself where it starts to matter more. But until then, just keep your breathing steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Next is resistance. Okay, what is the cause of resistance? Which means, what is causing you to build the muscle. For this example, using this push-up, right, the resistance would be my body weight, as with most calisthenic exercise. You come down and exhale, okay? The resistance is my body weight, the weight of my body. Say I'm doing an isometric, which is just a hold, or holding halfway. Again, the resistance is my body weight. Say I'm doing the prerequisite movements. All right, say I'm just trying to feel the engagement of the target muscle group. Okay, the resistance is my arms coming out. Okay, that weight is away from my midline. The weight of my arms is away from my midline. Therefore, there is resistance from the weight of my arms becoming further away from my midline, which is here. Right now, my arms are at my midline. My arms are away from my midline. Okay, so here, that's why usually in the loading phase, you don't really feel much resistance, especially if it's your body weight. If you go here, you're gonna feel the resistance, especially if you have a resistance band. All right, say we're talking about a resistance band. Say I'm holding a band in my hands. If I'm here, there's really not resistance because the band is not tight, it's loose. If I push out, the band is tight and there is resistance, okay? Which the resistance is coming from the tension of the band and my arms coming away from my midline. All right, weights are the opposite. If I'm holding, say I'm holding weights in my arms, okay? Now, gravity also comes into effect here, okay? Because if I'm holding weights, I push them out, resistance is going to be pulling downward, in which case I'm going to feel this here in my shoulders. If I wanted to feel it here in my chest, I got to go with gravity, which is here. All right, so say I'm holding weights in my hands. All right, this, because due to the frame of my body, I don't feel any resistance holding the weight. If I press up, all right, actually here, if I'm at the top, I don't feel much resistance either due to the structure of my body. However, if I'm halfway, I will feel resistance, okay? Because the structure of my body is not holding it up. It's all muscles and the gravity pulling down, okay? And meaning that my chest muscles are supporting the weight, all right? Just remember this acronym. Remember BROM. When it comes to acronyms, what? What? What do you mean you never heard of BROM? Haven't you ever watched an exercise video before? Haven't you ever read a book? What's the matter with you? How can you ever not even hear of BROM before? It's the most well-known acronym in the history of anything. Okay, so maybe I made that one up. My point is, whatever works for you to help you remember what to do, then that's all that should matter. You know what? I'm going to prove that you can make an acronym just on the fly from anything. So what do I say? What have I said a lot in this video? Keep it simple, right? And be basic. Okay. Serious, intrinsically motivated. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It applies. Do you have an intrinsic motivation? If you don't, now's the time to get one. People love to exercise. Or be basic. Balance. Adapt to the change. Setback, right? Everybody faces setbacks. And then going through an intervention, right? Learning more about yourself, overcoming the obstacles. And let's see, once you go through that setback and go through that intervention, you go through a change and then you build the strength. Let's go. See? Simple, basic. There you go. There's some acronyms that make sense, okay?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Don't have to worry about the range of motion. It doesn't matter too much. The thing about the range of motion is it's specific and unique to you, and it's always a work in progress, okay?
Obviously, the goal for anybody, for any exercise, is to get as much range of motion as possible. So ideally, for a push-up, to have full range of motion, you have to get all the way down to the floor and all the way back up, full extension of the arms. But if you're unable to do that, it's okay. Just use whatever range of motion you can do. Some movement is better than no movement at all, and it'll get better over time, which will result in
Calisthenic developed range of motion, otherwise known as CD-ROM.
Stop it. Get some help.
All jokes aside, calisthenic developed range of motion is actually an appropriate term for this. So say you wanted to play around with the range of motion. Here's a quick reminder that it's 3 sets, 10 to 15 reps, isometric, 15 to 30 second interval. Like I said, you could play around with it. You could do the upper half of the rep, or you could do the lower half of the rep, which means you go all the way down to the floor with a push-up and back up halfway. Trust me, even just this small change will completely change up the exercise. It's actually considered a different exercise completely like this. And you don't have to do strictly how I'm doing. You could do it on the knees, you could do it against the wall, same variations. Also, this is for any exercise I show. Just be creative with it. There's infinite possibilities. You could use the prerequisite movements I did, the medicine ball, the household items. The point I'm trying to make here is you want to pick the variation that works best for you out of everything I've shown here and experiment with it. So feel free to go back and watch the chapter if need be and try out the different variations I've shown and incorporate it into chapters 6 and 8 of this video to incorporate in your own program. And basically, once you have picked one that works best for you, just practice, practice, practice. Consistency is key, and you're going to get better, you're going to get stronger. And this applies to any other exercise you end up choosing in chapter 6 and chapter 8 when you put it all together later. So pick what variation works best for you. Keep in mind what works best for your specific anatomy, and just make sure you watch out for that dangerous,
Vigorous, deceived range of motion. You never heard of that one either? Maybe it's because it's DVD-ROM.
Hey, thanks so much for watching, everybody. If you want to see another video that pairs well with this, click the video right here. See you in the next one.